DevelopSec, Developing Security Awareness with James Jardine, brought to you by Jardine Software. Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of the DevelopSec podcast. I'm your host, James Jardine, and today we're going to start talking a little bit more. In the first episode, the welcome episode, we talked a little bit about why we need security and some of that surface area that's covered, like these different devices, like your Nest or, all these connected devices that exist out there. So today I want to touch a little bit more on that and start talking about it because it is kind of hot in the news right now with the Target breach that happened just a few weeks ago, as details are starting to flow out where there's speculation that the attackers actually got through into the system using credentials going through an HVAC system. And this is something we see very common. A lot of companies now, as they start to bring different services in, you got your HVAC systems, you've got security systems, all the stuff that manage, access to the doors, elevators. I mean, all these different services that you can now bring into your company are starting to become internet connected. And one of the things a lot of these companies like to do is provide you with some form of management service to say, hey, we'll monitor what you guys are doing so we can best set up the policy to meet your needs, right? We want to make it as efficient as possible. So that way, if you're using an HVAC system, we're monitoring it to make sure everything's working properly. If there's something wrong, we can get out here and fix it maybe before you guys even are aware that a problem's about to happen. So there's a lot of good reason behind why we have people coming out and connecting to these systems. But a lot of times we forget about the fact that these systems are being tied directly into our corporate networks. It's not a separate segmentation with its own connection to the internet, and there's, an actual air gap between this HVAC system and your corporate network. A lot of times we're seeing stuff being plugged in directly to the corporate network. Maybe the integrator decided, hey, here's a network jack, let's plug it right into this, or let's tie into your wireless. And a lot of times we don't pay close enough attention to the configuration to that we actually end up running into a problem where if they're using default credentials or the same sets of credentials across multiple locations and somebody finds that out, then, a simple search on the internet, you find a bunch of HVAC systems. You can start attempting to guess the passwords and the usernames for these devices. And then if you actually get into it, it's now your pivot point. This is how I'm going to move from outside the network inside the network. Very similar to the idea of using a phishing scam to send emails to users inside the corporate network, get them to execute some sort of malicious code, which then gets you onto their machine. And then that turns into that pivot point to get me inside that corporate network. And now all the stuff that we have out, separating the corporate network from the external world is kind of null and void because now I'm past the firewalls. I'm past all these different things. And a lot of people kind of lack on monitoring that inside stuff. And it's the same thing for home users, right? A lot of us have firewalls that are built into our modems that we have, whether it's a cable modem or DSL modem. A lot of them have some form of firewall built in to have some protection against the outside world. But if you start bringing stuff in, how do you, know if you're opening yourself up to some form of attack? It's kind of concerning for me. I've thought about getting security cameras to kind of post around the house. But, you see a lot of these that, you can check it from your phone from anywhere. Just plug it in and you can go out to the cloud and log in and see what's going on in your house. Well, I start to get concerned over, how is that really protected? How are you guys getting into it? How are you guys protecting yourself so that somebody else can't just easily access your cloud service to then access my video cameras or my security system? So we really need to start thinking about how it is when we implement these type of devices, we secure them and lock them down. Because all too often when we plug them in, we leave these default settings. Another common one is printers. A lot of times we go and we just plug a printer into our system and we don't really change the configuration. Maybe it's not default, secure by default. So if you don't go in there and change some things, you can really open yourself up to be able to do a lot of things. We actually did an assessment where on the network was a printer that was wide open, and you can gain information from the printer, but you could also go in and set things up that every fax, every scan, everything that gets printed gets resent over to a forwarded email address. So if I put the attacker email address in there, every time somebody faxes or scans something, I can get that sent to me and I get a copy of it. Right? That could be huge, being able to intercept that type of data. Never mind being able to then possibly use that device as a pivot point to then start attacking from there. So we see a lot of this with all kinds of different devices. We need to think about the surface area that we have. It's not always just technical, right? We have a lot of stuff that's not a technical surface area. When you think of physical systems that are out there, gaining entry into a building, how are we guarding against that? What are we doing from a physical standpoint to keep people out? Do we use badge readers of some sort? Do we have a security guard sitting there watching everybody that comes through? If we have a badge reader, what is that badge reader connected to? Is it just connected to the internal network? Is it connected to the internet for some unknown reason? So that way another company can help monitor and manage that item. And so as we start bringing these in, we need to start looking at how do these devices fit together? How do they work with our network? So we have an understanding of how do we need to segment these, because we don't want to just dump a utility type system onto our corporate network if that's not what we need to do. Right? We need to figure out if there's a way to take that and segment it off so that way it can't get access. So even if somebody did get in and all of a sudden start monkeying around with the temperature in the building or, being able to do this, it doesn't affect our corporate data. Yes, it's still a problem, and we still want to make sure that we're configuring everything properly, but we have to assume that everything is compromisable. So if we do that, then we take more precautions about, hey, let's make sure that I take this network piece and segment it off. So that way, in the event somebody does get to this, they'll be limited on what they can actually do. And then you really have to ask the question, do you need that to be connected out to the internet? And how are you handling that? Do the admins and security team know that you've got this device all of a sudden on your corporate network that's connected to the internet? I've seen situations where people have come in and, the installer has installed a Wi-Fi router into the corporate network so that way he could get access. Just different things to be able to tie in that nobody in the company even really knew how they did it. All of a sudden, yeah, your system works, you're good to go. But wait a minute, how are you guys configured in this? How are you getting access to it? Because you're managing it, but I don't know how you're doing it. We should be aware of everything going in and out of our networks and understand that. You get a new device at home. You get, I have the Nest, I have the Nest smoke detectors, all those. And, starting to understand, hey, wait, these are internet connected. I can go to my phone and look at everything going on with these. What's blocking anybody else from getting to this? These are making calls out to a cloud service. Is there anything there that's going to allow somebody to get in and all of a sudden change my settings and freeze me out of my house, or, make it so hot in here, make the auxiliary heat run, because that costs way more than just your normal heat to run up like an electricity bill or something like that. There's all kinds of things that attackers want to do. A lot of times we don't really think about a lot of the stuff that the malicious user can use stuff for. You see a pencil and you just see a writing utensil. But an attacker thinking maliciously, there's so many things you can come up with of what can I do with that pencil? Can I use that pencil as a doorstop? Can I use it for this? Can I use it for that? We look at so many more uses for things. So even something simple like a thermostat being connected, the average user doesn't really think much of it, but an attacker actually may see something good there if they can control that. Maybe they can actually kill the unit. Now you have to get a new one. It could be a couple $100. And if you think of some of these bigger systems, like a big HVAC system and a big company like Target or their stores, if I can actually get in there and actually kill the HVAC system and do that remotely, well, how many stores could I do that to where it would actually make a dent into their profits or, their margins that, hey, we have to continually keep up, fixing our HVAC system. These things keep breaking. What is going on, and how long until they figure that out, that it's because it's internet connected and they got some default password on it that people are getting in. So we should all be going back and thinking about what type of systems do we have in place, and then of those systems, which ones are internet connected? Do we know? Read your documentation, find out. Is your security system internet connected? Are your security cameras available through the internet? Is your HVAC system or your electricity and all that stuff controlled by some board that's connected to the internet? If it is, we have to start digging deeper in. How do we then analyze, well, how is it connected? How is it configured? Do we have it set up to have a unique username and password? Do we rotate those passwords? Is there some restriction that only allows certain types of IP addresses to come into our account, right? So maybe we have it locked down and say, yes, we do have a secure, the company is managing our HVAC system, but we've also got IP address filtering, so it only accepts stuff from the IP address of their facility. Not completely foolproof, but it does help reduce that surface area. Know that we've changed the passwords. And I've seen this before too, where we've had the vendor request that the client actually go in and change their passwords back to the default passwords on their devices. So the vendor could actually get in and do some maintenance. And then after that, they forgot to change their passwords back. And then during an assessment, you go through and look, and there's all kinds of devices that have default passwords. And, it's like, hey, this looks really bad. I don't know what's going on because, you guys were doing so well. Then all of a sudden we're seeing, hey, why are all these default passwords out here? And it was one of those deals that it just kind of got overlooked that, hey, oh yeah, we had to change that for this maintenance, and I guess we never changed it back. So thinking about those type of processes that, hey, maybe you have your own password, and if they need to get in, you can change it, let them in, change it back. It's still a window of opportunity, or find some other way for these systems to be authenticated against. So it's not some default password. This is exactly what we saw with all of our routers, all of our modems. They have these default passwords. Oh, I see you have a Cisco router. It's going to have admin no password as the default. Or you've got some Zoom ADSL modem, right? And this is the password at default. And if you don't change it, somebody could come along and just boop, type it in, and they're into your router and they're modifying your settings. Same thing we're going to see with all these other devices that start becoming connected to our systems. We had talked previously about this idea that, hey, our TVs are becoming connected. Right? What if somebody gets into a TV when they start putting backdoors into TVs so that way they can push updates or whatever reason they have to be able to connect into a TV? Could that be a pivot point now into your network? The gaming consoles, all these different devices. I mean, there was I think a crock pot that's internet connected. What does that give you? If I can get to my crock pot from the internet, is that a way into the rest of the house? Refrigerators, stoves, all these different things we're starting to see become internet connected, but we're not looking a lot at how the security of these devices work. And I think from the home aspect, a lot of times home users really don't think about that. I got a smart TV. Sure, I'll plug it into the internet so I can get Hulu or Netflix or one of these other services that'll stream media to me. But we don't really consider, well, what happens when I plug this device in? Do I have some sort of problem? Because if I plug it in and somebody can get into my network, well, what can they do? And a lot of times we think from a home standpoint, there's really nothing on my network. But that's not usually the case. Even if it's not sensitive information, there's stuff worthwhile to get into somebody's network if you're an attacker. Whether that's just to launch attacks from that network instead of their own to try to cover their tracks, or mounting downloads to be served up from your area so that way they can use all your storage space as their storage space. To be able to start streaming media to other people. Hey, let's start spreading this bandwidth around a little bit. There's lots of cause to this, yet as consumers, we really don't think about, I'm going to connect this to my network. What's that really going to do? And we need to start asking those type of questions, looking for, how is this securing? Why isn't the box telling me, hey, this connects to the internet and this is how it does it? Maybe we need to get better at that. Maybe we need a way to be able to, when we purchase something like the Nest, it says, hey, I connect to the cloud, but this is how I do it. And here should be what we have tested, the limitations on this device. So even if somebody got into the Nest, they wouldn't be able to then move from that to some other device in your network. Or they got into your TV, maybe they brick your TV, maybe they, change some programming, but they're limited to the TV. And, maybe there needs to be something like that. I don't know the exact answer for solving it, but I do know that as we start seeing more of these systems coming online, we need some way to be able to identify what these systems are doing, how they're configured. I'm just as bad as everybody else. I don't read directions. I plug something in and I figure out how it works. And, I think that's fairly common, and we don't think about these things, and we just need to get better at it. So I think, we're seeing a lot more stuff become internet connected. It's not going to go away. But think about that from a company standpoint. If your company uses any of these systems, ask the questions. Are you guys, is our HVAC system connected to the internet? Use Target as an example. If it was in fact the way they got in, check those things out. Do we have them segmented? Do we have the passwords changed? Do we have any IP address filtering on them for something to get to them? Do they even need to be connected to the internet? Having answers to all those questions are going to help secure your networks and keep your information safe. We have to start taking control of this idea that while I may be giving information to somebody else, it's my information, or I have that information, I have possession. What can I do to add safeguards to help protect that information in any way I can? So think about that. Look around your offices, look around your home, think about the things that are plugged in, and just start asking questions and find out if they're plugged in, why they're plugged in, how they're configured. Read your manuals to find out how it should be configured in a secure manner, so that way you don't end up being in the news because somebody went through the HVAC system or your elevator system or your security system or your badge system to get into your network. Next time, I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about physical security. I think it relates to this, but there's a lot you can say about physical security and thinking about physical security, so I want to save that kind of for its own episode. So we'll talk about that coming up soon. So that was episode 3. Thanks for listening. I kept it short, under 20 minutes, and I hope you'll listen back for the next one. Thank you. You have been listening to the DevelopSec podcast with James Jardine. Follow us on Twitter at DevelopSec and visit our website at www.developsec.com for more episodes and information.